In Module 1, we're going to focus on finding what I call your deep why for law school admissions. So I remember when I was in the spring break of my sophomore year in high school, my family and I blocked out a couple of days and we traveled around to different colleges. And we were focused at the time on different pre-med programs because my father was a doctor, and so the assumption with my parents was that I would also go to med school. And then I remember at the end of the trip, I was totally bored and demoralized, and I just knew that the idea of sort of spending 4 years in college preparing for med school just did not make sense. And so when I got back, I finally talked to my parents and told them, look, this whole pre-med plan is not going to work. It's not really what I'm interested in. And so we eventually sort of realized that this didn't make sense. And from that point forward, I felt free to pursue what I really wanted to do, which was politics and public policy. And then I began to think about how to break into that field, and I decided for a variety of reasons that that law school generally was what made sense, but also that there were particular law schools that would help me to get to that goal. And the reason that ended up being important is that over the coming years, even though some of my plans and ideas and so forth changed, the overall plan and strategy and goal of going to law school, going to top law school as a means of going into a career in politics never really changed. And that allowed me basically to navigate the law school admissions process efficiently because I always knew what I needed to focus on, I knew why I was doing it, and it helped me overcome a lot of the distractions and doubts and so forth. So I think obviously each of you are going to have a different set of goals and strategies and so forth, but I think it's really important at the outset to figure out your why, to figure out why you want to go to law school, why you want to go to a particular law school, and that way it's going to help you do two things. One is really sort of having a source of motivation, a foundation to avoid distraction and fatigue and all the other things and doubts that will eventually come about. But the other is that it'll really allow you to have a focused, narrow, tailored, efficient strategy that's going to maximize your odds of getting in. So the way to begin to figure out your why is, as an initial exercise, I would open a Word document or take out a piece of paper and spend some time just making a list of the top reasons why you want to go to law school. And I would think about your intellectual interests. I would think about what you want to do for your career. And then I would also think about other things, sort of how much money you want to make. Maybe think about whether it would make other people in your family happy. Just really think about all the motivations you have, all the goals you have, all the things that you might achieve by going to a top law school. And then once you have that, what I would do is look at each of the things on your list and just like you would as a law student or ultimately a legal practitioner, look at each reason carefully and critically and try to make the best counter argument that you can on why these reasons are not valid or why they're not worth pursuing. So for example, you might maybe one of your goals is that you're interested in becoming an attorney to help people manage sort of a difficult tax or a regulatory issue. So then maybe the counter argument would be, well, maybe there's another career path that could allow you to do that. And then I would also think in terms of counter arguments, this is the time really to air any doubts or insecurities you might have. Maybe you're wondering if you're smart enough. Maybe you're wondering if you'll be capable of getting the right LSAT score or GPA. So I would just think about all of these sorts of things, and then really sort of look at the pros and cons of each thing. And odds are that maybe some of the reasons on your initial list you'll begin to question, but most of them I think you'll probably continue to believe in. And now, having gone through the process of really analyzing them and becoming critical of them, you'll really sort of have the confidence of knowing that you're going to law school for the right reasons. These are the reasons that'll make you happy and fulfilled. And now, going forward in the process, you'll always have that why as a sort of foundation to look at and draw energy and inspiration from. Now, once you have that initial list of whys, that I think can provide you with the initial guidance to begin to figure out what are the particular law schools that make sense for you to be focused on. And the way you can do this will vary depending on your goals, but you might consider the degree to which going to a top tier or prestigious law school really will be advantageous. You might look at whether different law schools have different particular programs, or whether there are particular professors that you might want to work with. You might think about the area of the country or the city that you might want to be in. There are any number of different factors, but the more you know about your why, the easier it'll be to winnow down the list of different law schools. And what I want you to do is, with this list of law schools, really break it up into 3 different categories. In the first category, I want you to pick one school, only one, that will be your top choice. And right now, don't worry about whether you have the qualifications, whether it's realistic. Really think about, if you could have your pick of any school, which one would it be? And if you feel like it's tied between 2 or 3, really think about it and really come to a decision on one that you really want to aim for. And then in the second category, these are the group of law schools where you would be very happy going to, where going to any one of these law schools would basically help you get to your end goals or fulfill all the whys that you identified in the beginning. And another way to think about it would be that if you were offered admission into any one of these law schools, would you have any hesitation about accepting an offer? And if the answer is no, if the answer is that if you get into one or more of them, you would accept an offer, then these definitely should be in your category 2. And then I would have a third and final category, which is a series of law schools where if you get in, you'd be open to going to them, but you're not entirely sure, and you may want to consider other plans. You might decide, for example, that you'll take a year off and reapply, or you might decide that you want to find a job instead and then maybe revisit the law school thing. Maybe you want to do a different graduate program, but these are schools that are at least in contention among your competing options. And in terms of, if you're wondering whether or not there's a certain number that you should be aiming at, what I would say is that not really, that depending on your goals and your whys, the number may fluctuate. So I remember, for example, when I was at the admitted students weekend for Yale, there was a classmate of mine who was debating between going to Yale Law School or not going to law school at all. So he maybe only had one school on his list. I remember I had 4, and I ultimately applied to 4 schools, but I also know people who will apply to 10 or 15 or even more schools above and beyond that. And there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing I would urge is, as your list expands more and more, think about whether you really did the initial work on the whys and you really have a deep understanding of what you want to get. And odds are that the more you know about your plans and so forth, the more you'll be equipped to really have a hierarchy. So once you really identify your whys, you subject them to criticism. You revisit the whys and really sort of know with confidence why you want to go to law school, and then you use that to figure out what are the specific law schools, the specific programs that you want to aim for. That'll give you a solid baseline and a foundation to begin to develop the other parts of your application.